My name is Rob, and I want to apologize about the font. I think whatever PDF reader this is has messed with the font a little bit, but hopefully every slide will be readable. Um, so my talk today is the digital cockroach bait station, and the point is to teach you the basics of how to build spam honeypots, and then also go into a little bit of information about what data you can get from spam. And what information you can get, especially from headers, and some things maybe you don't that are not obvious that you can gain by analyzing headers. So, who am I? I work for Threat Connect, and this is a startup in Virginia, near Washington D.C. And I'm a senior threat intelligence researcher. I do malware analysis and integrations and just about anything that needs to be done. And this is my Twitter handle down here, so follow me on Twitter when you have a chance. So what are the problems here? The main problem is that you need to have more fresh malware samples. You need to have fresh malicious links. Fresh advanced fee fraud, if that's the type of threat that you are working on. And so the goal here is to take from all of these different types of attacks, phishing attacks, malware attacks, gaining actionable threat intelligence, and gaining context around what this particular attack that you're looking at is. Like, what is probably the purpose of the attack, who the adversary behind the attack is, which sometimes is difficult to determine. But the ultimate goal is to give you information about whether to pay more attention to this particular attack. If you have one of your employees that has clicked a link, is this something that you need to focus more attention on and do damage control, or is this something that's just some sort of unwanted program which you could just reformat their machine and then move on? It's not something, not Chinese APT, or it's not some sort of malware strain. So I'm going to kind of use two terms interchangeably. I think they're basically the same thing, so a spam trap and a spam honeypot. I will just use these terms interchangeably, but the idea of a spam trap is a little bit older and has been around for years and years and years, but the idea of a spam trap was more to collect spam on your mail server and then, at the same time block, just to be able to block the spam. But the purpose of what I'm talking about here is sort of another advanced stage of this type of honeypot, where what you want to do is gather data out of it about malware binaries, malicious links, different types of attachments, etc. So this is the definition that I have of spam traps. This is from Wikipedia. So spam traps are usually email addresses that are created not for communication, but rather to lure spam. So my concept of a spam honeypot still fits within this older definition of spam trap. But the purpose is much more advanced than just simply blocking the spam itself. So I kind of, I want to relate this a little bit because I have a background in biology, and so I like to kind of, bring a little bit of biology into this and think of the adversaries that I'm working against as cockroaches. But not all of these are cockroach traps. So each one of these is a type of insect trap, and this one, you may recognize. That one is a pretty traditional cockroach trap. But this is actually for catching flies, like Drosophila flies, or very small flies. This is a general trap for most types of insects. And then this is another type of cockroach trap. This one is, in my opinion, absolutely disgusting because it has what's called roach butter on it. And so they eat the roach butter and they take it back. It has poison in it. They take it back to their colony, and then they, the ones that are around that roach also die. And then this one is probably the most advanced of all of these traps. This one is for bed bugs. And the way it works, it has a CO2 cartridge, and bed bugs actually are attracted to your breath. That's how they find you at night. So, but moving on from entomology, we'll move back to spam. So I always want to make everything that I work on very, very, very simple. I don't want to spend time maintaining a large system that is complex. I want to make something that is very, very simple. And I want to reuse open source software that has already been written and is solid and trusted. So you can choose whatever mail server you like to use, but I prefer using postfix. I would not recommend using something like SendMail unless you want to have a SendMail honeypot with the spam honeypot on top of it. But yeah, if you use something like postfix, and then what you do is you have a Python script, and I will go into the details of the Python script. You run the Python script so that every single email that's sent to this mail server is parsed and has all of the headers converted into JSON, and then any of the attachments and any of the links that are in the body are parsed out of it, and then all of this ends up being inserted into an Elasticsearch index. And this way you're able to do correlation among different IP addresses as senders, and you can also, you can make pretty graphs as well. So the red doesn't show up very well on these slides. I apologize. But so up here, this is postfix. So if you're not familiar with postfix, it's a generalist mail server software, very solid, fairly secure, and I personally recommend running it on FreeBSD or OpenBSD, something where you don't have to worry too much about the operating system also being part of your honeypot. So JSON, if you're not familiar with JSON, it's JavaScript object notation. And I personally prefer JSON over XML and over YAML and the other different markup languages, simply because obviously it's machine readable, but if you print it well with nice spacing, human beings can also read it. So you can read the data. You can read the data that's in that interchange format, but XML, I can't read XML. It's almost illegible because it's too busy. And then Elasticsearch, it's up to you. If you want to use a different type of database to store your data, that's up to you. There's MongoDB. There's other types of NoSQL. But I prefer Elasticsearch simply because it's very, very, very easy. Very easy to set up. It's very easy to use. And all of the text searching and access to Elasticsearch is via RESTful APIs. So it goes over the same protocol as all the REST APIs. So the mail server configuration, again, we're going for simple. You want to accept all email from any domain, even if the domain that you have that's pointing to this particular server is a different domain. If someone is going to send you spam, you don't want to reject it for any reason, even if it's for the wrong domain, wrong sender, anything. So you want to accept all usernames, and you want to accept any domains. But one thing that's very important is that you want to prevent having a bounce message sent back out. You don't want to run a spam honeypot and have you're attracting all sorts of spam coming in, and you don't want to waste time sending bounce messages back to all of these probably non-existent email addresses and from addresses, etc. And so you basically want to block all outbound mail. And essentially, one of the things that I've done on my spam honeypots is, on top of configuring the mail server to not send bounce messages or any sort of return message at all, I make sure that the host-based firewall on the VM blocks all outbound traffic on those certain ports so that I'm guaranteed not to make any mistakes. Even if there's like a misconfiguration, it still will not send something out that I don't want it to. So this is just, anything at anything. That's what you want to accept. So what I do is I process all of the inbound email with a custom Python script. And just as a backup, because for any reason, if your Elasticsearch cluster is unreachable and you can't send your data there, you want to have another copy of it because you might miss one thing that's very important. So you want to make sure that you keep a local copy on the mail server, on the spam honeypot, for a period of time, so that you can go back and reparse your messages if something messes up in your storage and database. So this is just a recommendation, and actually, if Python is not your language, you could use any language at all because it's very, very simple what I'm doing here. Basically parsing each one of the header fields into key value pairs, and then and then exporting that as a JSON file. And then the body and the body also as one key body, and then the value is the text of the body. And then also just as a second, so that there's a single text blob, I also save header as a key, and then the entire header not broken up, just exactly as it is in the message as another key value pair. So I prefer Python 3.4. There's certain times where I have to use Python 2, but I try to move away from Python for anything new. And then, like I said, it translates all of the emails into JSON format, and then exports them and saves them into an index in Elasticsearch. So good. This is a kind of a very busy slide, but we're going to spend a lot of time on this one because it's very important to know what data you can get from spam. And I apologize if you can't read it. I'll read it out to you. But so one of the important things that you can get is from the date time zone. So if you have legitimate email coming from Eastern Standard Time in the United States, chances are that's coming from a mail server that you might not trust, but at least you know that it's in the United States. But if you have an email that's inbound and the time zone is in China or in Europe, you might actually put maybe if you have some sort of filtration, you might put a +1 as far as like suspiciousness of this particular piece of email. So especially you can find information about where that mail server or the botnet or wherever it thinks it's sending from. You can get some small amount of information from the time zone itself. So pay attention to the time zone. SPF, so these next two, SPF and DKIM, these are important. So DKIM is domain keys. And both SPF and DKIM are methods of blocking spam. So they're a way to verify whether the sender of this particular email is who they say they are and is coming from the domain that they say they're coming from. So in this case, it's good to find this information. You can find forged DKIM keys. Also, the SPF, if you see SPF fail, pay more attention to that particular piece of spam. So another thing, this is something that is a little bit that might not be as obvious as the other components here. So the EHLO or HELO string, this is during the SMTP handshake. When one mail server or a mail client is speaking to a mail server, it makes a connection on port 25, and then it goes through an SMTP handshake. So the first thing it does is it says hello or EHLO, and then it says who its domain is supposed to be. So if, for example, I am a mail client and I'm telling the truth. I'm not like a misconfigured mail client. I'm not doing anything malicious. What I would do is if my mail client is configured to be at, rob at example.com, ELHO would say ELHO example.com, the domain that I'm telling the mail server that I'm coming from. So this one is actually interesting because let's say that you have a particular botnet which is sending out, thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of spam. There's only two things that it can do. It's not going to tell the truth, so it's not going to, it's not going to give you its true domain because it's a botnet. It doesn't actually have a specific domain. But there's two things it can do. It will have either similar to a domain generation algorithm, like the ones that you see for botnet C2, where they call back to a domain generation algorithm. So it'll have a similar type of algorithm, just generating random or semi-random domains, or it will just be configured to say the same thing over and over, the same like hard-coded ELHO string. So you can key off of that, and you can, for some types of botnet, you can identify that particular operator of the botnet because of the way that they've configured it. And so this is actually an indicator of that particular type of delivery method. So that one is pretty interesting. Also, obviously, the originating IP. Originating IP is not always the source. You could have open relays. You can have sometimes you even have a web server, and the web server is compromised, and the web server is actually sending out spam or relaying spam from botnet via like a PHP, similar to a PHP backdoor, but a PHP-based mailer. If you maintain websites and you have like a compromised WordPress site, you've probably seen this type of mailer before. So what you can get from the originating IP, obviously you can get network whois, GeoIP, ASN whois, and then also this is one that is that some people don't pay too close attention to, but there's rwhois. So an ISP will reassign a block of IP addresses to maybe a hosting provider, and so the hosting provider's information is found in the rwhois data. So if you need to contact someone to report abuse, often you can get the more specific information from rwhois. So the next one, reply to. So reply to is interesting for certain types of scams that you would see in spam. So for specifically, these are important. Very important in advanced fee fraud. So these are the sorts of things where the Nigerian prince is sending you $1 million as long as you send the Nigerian prince $100 now. This sort of thing, that type of adversary needs to receive your reply, so they don't forge the information here in reply to. This is usually a live address, and so you can use that as an indicator if you're collecting a set of threat intelligence. So this can be an indicator that you want to save, and also you can correlate across different attacks and follow patterns, because adversaries typically use their same set of email addresses or same style of email addresses over and over and over. The subject's interesting. The subject is interesting in certain ways, but when I get down here to this, when I talk about the SIM hash, that's where the subject will become more important. But the subject by itself is, until we get down here and I explain this, the subject is not necessarily that important at this point. The from address, this is typically forged. During the SMTP handshake, you can type, as long as that mail server that you're sending the spam to is maybe misconfigured or not configured very strictly, the from address can just be anything you want. You can just type in whatever you want. So the from address, not necessarily something that you wanted to keep as a specific indicator of a live email address that you may want to track, but it can be used to correlate across different attacks. You can also see. You'll even see if someone is trying to attack your company. You might even see the from address being an email address at your company. So then envelope sender. This is a little bit different than the from address. This is so when you have an SMTP session and the connection goes through the ELHO at the beginning, and then it says receipt to and mail from. So the mail from, the email address that is put into mail from is found here in the envelope sender. So this can be forged also, but it's actually it can even be a completely different address than the from, because from is actually when you go past the mail from and the receipt to, the next step you enter data, and so the from address is actually part of the data section of an SMTP connection. So so return path, this is not necessarily that important for me in this stuff, but this part, so xmailer and the mail URL, this is very, very, very interesting. So when you have a compromised website, and the compromised website is being used to send spam, one of two things can happen. One is the PHP mailer that's being used, that has been inserted into the compromised website and is being used to relay the spam. If the spammer doesn't configure it properly, it will actually record its own path on that mail server in this xmailer field in the header. So if you want to do some sort of takedown on that particular spam source, you can actually figure out exactly the file on the server that has been inserted into the server. So you can call the hosting company or the website owner and say, hey, not only take this file off, clean up your stuff, but also can you send me a copy of this file? I want to see what the configuration is inside, what the PHP code is for it. So the next part down here, this is another not so obvious but very interesting header component. So the MIME boundary string, when you have different types of data in the body of an email, they will have a MIME boundary string around them, unless the email is just plain text. If it's plain text, there won't be any MIME boundary strings. But if you have HTML or if you have an attachment, you'll have a MIME boundary string on both sides of that different type of data. And if you look, the MIME boundary string is typically a random or semi-random string of characters. But again, because that is you have a botnet and the botnet is just generating spam, chances are that botnet that's generating the spam is not using clean, good email client code that's going to generate a normal, a regular MIME boundary string. It's going to generate either the same MIME boundary string over and over for a lot of emails, or it will use one that has a certain pattern. And so this becomes its own indicator of the origin of that particular piece of spam. Okay, now we get down to SimHash. So this is something that I'm working on right now. It's still in sort of the I guess theoretical area, but SimHash is one of the two. I know of two algorithms that do piecewise fuzzy hashing. So piecewise fuzzy hashing is something that's used extensively in malware research. And what it is, you take a blob of data, and you break it up into certain known pieces, and then you take hashes of the pieces, and then when you have let's say two files that have had a piecewise fuzzy hash, you can compare them and see how different they are from each other. And if one part of it is slightly different, but then this whole area is the same, the distance between those two files will be very close. So there's two different types of piecewise fuzzy hashing that I'm aware of. One is called SimHash, and SimHash is actually a algorithm which is targeted towards text. So it's efficient for looking at two pieces of text and seeing how different or how similar they are. And then the other type is called SS Deep. And if you do malware research, you've probably heard of SS Deep. It's more tuned for looking at the difference between two binary files, right? So the thing that I'm working on is to take a SimHash of certain header fields, such as the from address, such as the subject, reply to, things that are going to be indicators, things that are going to be indicators of possibly, the origin of this of the spam, and then take a SimHash of each one of these, and in theory, I should be able to get basically a distance and a similarity between one email and another email, and see, and be able to use that in an automated way. If I have this particular, don't open or please open this fax, and has an attachment. If the set of header fields after I've run it through SimHash is close enough, I can also say, hey, this other email that's not necessarily asking about a fax might be closely related to this one because of some of the similarities in the header. So I can, perhaps use this to block it on a mail server, or just do it to find, nexuses of different attacks. So that's it for the header, and then. This is over here. This is all of the information, not all of the information, but these are some of the major components and information that you can get from the body of the email. So again, the advanced fee fraud attacks use phone numbers embedded in the email. That's one of the ways that they get you to contact them. From my experience, a lot of these are VoIP numbers that are pointing to another number, so that when they get taken down, they can just roll it to the next one. The next most prevalent from that is probably cell phones, but most of the time I see VoIP numbers in here. And then, of course, the attachment. The attachment can be either, it could be any number of things, and maybe a base64 encoded HTML. It could have a JavaScript attack buried in the attachment. It could be a binary. It could be any number of things. Also, you can get a URL if you've got a drive-by attack, or if you just have like a regular download. I've seen many malware attacks where the URL is just a file. Click and download the file, and then it said, the instructions in the email are please run this or please open this, and sometimes the file will be like jpeg.exe or or pdf.exe or something like this, and it works. I mean, it's amazing. It still works, but it does work. And then down here, I have listed two types of SimHash that I take of the body. And the reason for this, I just call this a rendered SimHash. And the reason for this is some emails will have plain text, and then in between another MIME boundary, they'll have an HTML with like all the pretty graphics and fonts and all that crap. So what I want to do is not necessarily take a SimHash that includes all of the HTML. So what I use is Beautiful Soup. You can use any type of scraper software, but I use Beautiful Soup to just remove all of the HTML tags. And then after I've removed all of the HTML tags, then I take a SimHash of the remaining data. And then obviously you can get an email address and then the text of the body. So this is just an overview of some of the different things that you can get from an email. And I already talked about Elasticsearch. So now this is the part where you. Oh, all right. I'm sorry. These were actually cockroaches, and those were bed bugs. But I guess the picture didn't come through on this laptop. I apologize. But this is where you want to, first of all, register a domain. Another option is to go and look. There's many domain squatting sites that want to sell you old domains. So some of them, you can rank the domain by its age. And so who cares what the domain is? I want a domain that's been out there for 20 years, just existing for 20 years, because it will attract more spam than others. One thing that's important, after you have registered your domain, make sure, if you're going to register it, make sure to turn on domain privacy or whatever thing that particular registrar provides, or just put fake information in there. Most of them won't cancel your domain for a year until someone complains about it. Now, the next step is to configure your DNS. There's a couple of nuances here for configuring your DNS. It's very important to make sure that you don't have only one IP address, because you're trying to simulate a real mail server in a real mail environment in a real enterprise in a company. So no company just has one IP address for their mail server. They have a set of IP addresses for their mail server referring to different ones. So make sure you assign at least 3 IP addresses. You can pretend, because the mail server, you only have to set up one spam honeypot, one mail server for this, but assign three different IP addresses at least to that server, so that you simulate a real environment. Also create a primary and 2 backup host names. So have all of them, mail1.example.com, mail2.example.com, and mail3, etc. Also simulating a real mail environment so that it looks right. Now, this last one, this is actually the one that's very nuanced. So you want to have 3 or more DNS MX records, and you want to have differing priorities set to those MX records. We're going to look at a slide in a minute that shows this, but the reason for this is sometimes the main, your primary mail server is where you have things like antivirus or some sort of, or you're running spam filters, and the protection that you have is on your primary mail server. Your secondary mail server or your tertiary mail server sometimes will have no spam filtration, no AV, and so I've seen a lot of spammers will send only to the higher priority MX records. They'll specifically, on purpose, not send to your primary mail server, because they're hoping that the primary mail server trusts mail that's coming from the secondary, and the secondary has no spam protection on it. So make sure you have 3 DNS MX records so that you catch that extra spam, and you catch those other people that are targeting lower priority MX mail servers. So now you need to generate email addresses to seed them out to all of the world, send it everywhere, get it on every single list and everything. But what you want to do is you can seed them on your own website, put them in put them in metadata, put them all over the place, give them to your friends, have your friends help seed when they write a comment on some website. Just have them put this random email address like in the bottom of their comment. Why not? But the important part here when you're seeding email addresses out is maintain either a spreadsheet or a database or something so that you know where the email address went, where you put it, what date you put it there, and maybe who you gave it to if someone else is going to seed it for you, so that all right, this place generates this type of spam, so you can correlate where that email address was seeded with the type of attacks and the type of spam that come into that particular email address. All right, so when you're registering a domain, sorry, this doesn't actually, it didn't wrap properly with this PDF reader. I apologize, but there's many free services out there for registering domains, and they will even let you have email service on them. The adversary uses these, like .tk and stuff like this. Why can't we use the same services? So just make sure that you protect your identity by using free email services. burner, basically burner emails, and protect yourself with domain registration, DNS service, and before you begin seeding anything out into the world and trying to collect spam, look very carefully at your own WHOIS information. Look very carefully at your DNS records. Look at it very carefully and see if you've made a mistake and you're leaking any information about yourself. If you've left your name, or if you've registered the domain and you forgot to turn on WHOIS privacy or something like this, and there's some identifying information about you, you want to make sure that's not there before you begin sending stuff out to attract adversaries. And also, this is something that's very, very important. On the spam honeypot itself, there is a pretty good chance that at some point this server will get popped by someone, right? So you don't want to have the admin or the username that you're logging into the spam honeypot as your hacker handle. You don't want to have any trace of anything on there. Just call it something boring like user 1 and then admin 1. So that there's no trace of anything that if someone pops your spam honeypot, they could possibly figure out like who you are, any information about that. Also, with things like logs, it's up to you. When I set up my spam honeypots, the auth logs and incoming IP address logs are all sent to dev null. So that if the box gets popped, it makes it a little bit more difficult for someone to figure out where I'm coming from. So yeah, make your username on the new server very generic. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, so this was a screenshot of the DNS records for a example spam honeypot. I apologize, this slide doesn't work. By the way, if anybody wants the slides, just come tell me afterwards. I'll give you a copy of the slides. I've got them here on PDF, and you should be able to, if you look at this, on a different PDF reader, you should be able to see this example slide. So now, you have to sometimes have a little fun when you're doing this sort of thing. So when you're generating the email addresses, you want to generate email addresses. Some of them you might want to generate them that are just random whatever, but other ones you might want to have something that looks real. Real names for companies and this sort of thing. So have fun with it. So these are just a few sites that I use to generate the names. So I have behind the name, random name generator, name mesh, and these two are interesting because they make they spit out random generic company names. So if you want to make a domain name that's based on something that sounds like a real company, just have this make a couple of random names. Another thing, Scrabble word finder. If you like Scrabble, you can increase your Scrabble knowledge at the same time as you're making fake email addresses by looking through all the Scrabble word finders and then memorizing the words that you're using there and just creating email addresses with it. And then anagram solvers, so put in a word and then find all the different anagrams for it and then create email addresses for that. So now you have spam, and this slide also had a picture. It had a picture of probably my favorite piece of spam I've ever seen. And believe me, come get the PDF of this. It actually has a malicious link where it ends in main.php, and then it has a big ASCII like finger clicking the link. And it's awesome. I apologize. The PDF reader on this machine is not the best. But thank you. This is my company's blog where we publish research. This is my Twitter handle, and then this is our company Twitter handle. So please come check us out and follow me. And if we have any questions.
Hi. Yes. What is the advantage of generating mailbox names over using a catch-all mailbox?
What's that?
what is the advantage of generating mailbox names on the honeypot over using a catch-all mailbox?
So the question is, what is the benefit of generating a set of email addresses over just having a spam honeypot that catches everything? So you do want to always have a spam. The underlying spam honeypot is that it catches everything. But the reason why you would generating the random ones is not the important thing. It's that you have a specific email address that you have seeded in one specific location, so you know that if something is sent to this particular email address, you know where you seeded it, and you know perhaps some information about like how the adversary is getting or gathering their email addresses.
You could also, you said that you log when you seeded that email address to a certain forum or whatever to gather spam. You could also log that email address. It would still show up in the log of the catch-all email address. That email that you.
So now I'm not following you.
If you send out.
Oh wait, so hold on. You're saying no. I think there might have been a misunderstanding. So when I say generate email addresses, all I mean is generate the text of the email address. Nothing on the server. Okay. Yeah, the catch-all will catch all of that.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, when I'm saying generating an email address, I'm just saying, use those tools to generate a list of email addresses that you put in your spreadsheet or your database so that you can correlate that with the spam that's coming in.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Thanks.
Sure.
Well, first of all, thank you for an interesting presentation. I have a feeling that this is only one half of the story, right? So you have built a system which is pretty elaborate. It can track where you've sent the seeded addresses to, what paths were used to harvest those addresses. Now, what I would be interested in, what mechanisms, mostly legal, do you have at your own disposal to actually do something about it? Basically, you are harvesting a lot of big data information about spammers. Somebody might say, so what? What can you do with it?
Okay, so this is a good question. So once you've gathered your spam, what can you do with it? What purpose do you have for gathering this? There's many different purposes here, but I'll talk about one. So specifically, if there is a new attack, and I'll actually not even give. I will give you a specific use case. So after Hacking Team was popped, everybody remembers that 2 months ago, Hacking Team was popped, and then they had a set of Flash O-Days that were being weaponized. The first one that I found that weaponized it was an Angler EK, and then like Rig exploit kit and all the other exploit kits also used it. But there was also an APT group, which is known by the name WECB. So the WECB APT group began using that particular Flash exploit, weaponized from the Hacking Team disclosure. And so they began sending that out just as a shotgun blast via spam, and that's how I caught that. So the way that I gathered the data to then look at the Flash file, reverse it into action script, find out what the payload binary is that it's delivering. All of this, I gained that knowledge by having a spam honeypot working and catching that to begin with.
Okay, so are you also employing something like legal things? Is it something you can do in this global world? Is it doable?
Is running a spam honeypot? Let's change. So let's change that question slightly. Instead of is it legal? Let's ask the question, is it
no,
illegal?
my question was-
not to my knowledge, is it illegal? So.
No, my question was not about you being legal, but once you've tracked down somebody, can you take legal actions to take that guy down?
So you
How
know,
doable is that?
let's say so after after you've developed a set of threat intelligence on a particular attack, and then from that set of threat intelligence, maybe over quite a bit of time, you were able to perhaps an adversary, their persona, emerges from from your analysis of this data. Typically, it's difficult to do something legally against that entity. They're typically in a different country than the U.S. However, it's still very, very important to know that information so that your security team and your company can make a decision as to whether this adversary is very capable or whether they're just some script kiddie that doesn't have a whole lot of knowledge and is not specifically targeting you. So you'd be able to divide your attacks between just typical crimeware and then something that's a targeted attack against you. And so therefore you're able to not necessarily go after that adversary or that group, but you're able to make an educated decision as to whether you need to pay more attention to what just happened on your network, or if you can just use regular procedures and move on,
Thank you.
First of all, thanks for a very interesting presentation. I really liked it.
Thank you.
I have a question. Have you ever thought of making your honeypot as an open relay? With one option is to limit the connections which coming from outside the world to your server to prevent server exhaustion and at the same time prevent reflected denial of service attack. But maybe it's a good idea to be intermediate, being one in the middle between the attacker, better than being the receiver.
Okay, I hadn't thought about that, but definitely we'll talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Any more questions? All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.